Hey, this is Tim Downs from the Downs Legacy team at West USA Realty, and welcome to your Goodyear Real Estate Market Report for June 2026. So today we're going to be diving directly into the raw MLS data, tracking metric by metric across our dashboard to expose some of the realities of our Goodyear housing market as we head into mid-2026. So whether you're focused on luxury master plan communities, of Estrella and Pebble Creek, established communities in Palm Valley and Canyon Trails, or the high growth construction corridors that are north of the I-10 along the Loop 303, properties are moving with notable efficiency. So let's step through the dashboard metrics together and see what we can learn from it. So let's start with the total sales or closed sales as it stands here. So at current month, we show 209 closed sales as of the end of May 2026. So 209. The year-to-year change, as you can see here on the dashboard, last year was 204. So we got about a 2.5 increase on the year-to-year numbers. So not too much there. One notable thing that does jump out in the data, though, is the 90-day trend, the quarterly trend. As you see, the 209 here under the May bar. If you just go back 3 months, you see quite a bit of a difference from February into May. So we're talking about a 57% increase, as it shows, from 133 up to 209. So quite a bit of a jump there over the last quarter. So one of the takeaways that I guess you could look at this is from this perspective is homes are still selling in Goodyear. But buyers remain selective, to say for sure. The market is moving, although it's not moving at the same pace at every price range. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But here's the trend. It started off slow. We jumped up in March, which is pretty much expected. That typically happens after the holiday lull. Not a lot of activity. December, a little bit more in January, a little bit more in February, and then we see all those closings hit in March. So we did see that typical season spike, came down a little bit in April, came down a little bit in May, but it's still pretty consistent. All 3 months, the last 3 months, were over 200 closed sales. So let's jump over to price, the median sales price. So as it stands for May 2026, we saw $469,990. So the year-to-year change here, a little bit of a dip. Obviously, we see here on the graph, last year in May, we saw 475,000. Today, we're down to 469,000. So roughly, a little bit over $5,000 difference year to year. One obvious thing that we're seeing here is the dip in price from March. We saw some consistency across January, February, March. We saw quite a bit of a dip down here in April. So we went from the 489,000, basically 490,000, falling all the way down to 475. And then a month later, we're down 5 more thousand. So I'm not an economist, a trained economist, but one thing I do notice is last year's number. We did see a spike in the February numbers of last year, which we did not see this February, but we also saw quite a bit of a drop around that same time frame. So ours kicked in about a month later versus last year, but nevertheless, it appears as though there was a same kind of a drop around this time frame last year. So glean from that what you may, but the trends are coming down. We did see that trend continue down all through last year, all the way through August, where we saw a jump in September, and then, of course, a drop again. But not too out of the norm of what we can see here. One of the simple takeaways is, Goodyear home values have remained somewhat steady, but the market is experiencing a dramatic price drop here, or price shift. Buyers are definitely have more negotiation power, and it's bearing out in the prices. I do know for when I look into the MLS, when I look at all of the price changes across Goodyear, I see lots of price reductions. So in a lot of cases, there's houses that maybe are borderline. Maybe there's something about them that isn't just jumping out at buyers. That top tier kind of listing, just that average kind of listing. It's just something to consider. Prices are trending down in a lot of ways, and that's something to consider if you're looking to put your house on the market. So let's jump over to price range. So very interesting numbers here. Current month for May 2026. As you can see, if we just start over on the left-hand side, very few properties under that $300,000 mark. But in the $300,000 mark, from 300 to 400, we see 32 homes sold in the month of May. And then the big jump, 400 to 500,000 price range. Obviously, this is the bulk of the Goodyear homes sold. Quite a bit of them, 96 of them. Obviously, in comparison to the 300,000 to 400,000, we have 32 versus 96. And then going forward a little bit into the 500,000 to 55 or 550,000, we're down to 22. And then jumping up to 550,000 to 750,000, we have 35. 12 of them up from that 750 to $1 million range. And then, of course, we have some data out here for the over $1 million. But the king of Goodyear is definitely the $400,000 to $500,000 range. So that's if that's the budget you're looking for, then obviously there seems to be quite a bit of activity here in Goodyear. So let's jump over to active inventory. So current month, active inventory is 754 active listings. Last month, we had 726, which is about a 4% increase from last month to this month. Year to year, we saw a 2.5% decrease. Last year, we were at 773 at this same time. So the inventory's come down a little bit, but as you can see, we're seeing some consistency. There's not a lot of spikes here from even year to year. I mean, the highest we got was about 788 last year. This year, we've seen about 744 or 754 as the spike of the current year. So not a lot of fluctuation as it comes to active inventory. Very consistent across the board. Let's jump over to new listings. So new listings this month was 231 additional listings were added. So obviously we're seeing a less than it was compared to last year, less than it was compared to the last couple months. We did see quite a bit in January. We saw a lot less in February. Then we got a little consistent around 300, again around 300. This month, 230. So not sure if this trend is going to hold, but it doesn't look like there's a trend at all. We've got high, low, high, high, low. So looking at last year's number, you can kind of see somewhat kind of, a little bit of the same kind of environment where things were pretty steady. But obviously, as we went through the year, we saw it come down quite a bit and then peak up a little bit in the fall. But again, it's one of the takeaways that I'm seeing here is some relative consistency. We're not seeing huge drops. We're not seeing huge spikes. The market is staying pretty consistent. All right, let's talk about pendings. So the data shows pendings for the month of May was 149 pending homes. If we look at the purple trend here, we see the lull offset as we got out of the holiday period. We saw it spike over to 215 in February. We saw it spike all the way to 237 in March. And then things kind of consistently came down. Then down to 204, down to 149. So the pending home sales are slowing down a little bit in the current year. One thing that jumps out at me when I look at data like this is when you look at it from last year. Obviously, it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, but last year we saw somewhat kind of the same thing. We saw consistency January, February. We saw an increase. And then it came down. So this could be very much just seasonal, just how the year goes. But the bigger takeaway is consistency. It does this at least for the last 2 years. It's done the same thing. So if one thing you can look at is predictability. Predictability is nice to have when it comes to real estate market. If this is what it's going to look like, you can look at the rest of the year from last year at this point and say, okay, well, we see some relative straight lines here as well. So something to keep in mind as you're looking to buy or sell. All right, so let's look at velocity, starting with average days on market. So at present, we're seeing 89.3 days on the market. If you look at the yellow line here, we see, obviously we see in January, we see 80. Then it jumped up to 88. So it looks like there wasn't a lot of people looking for homes in January, fresh off Christmas. Then it popped down again to 81, and then it stayed consistent, about 80, and then we jumped back up again. I can't help but also notice some consistencies here. Last year, although we see the little inverse of January, February, but we see relatively the same number, and then we see a big drop, though. However, we see a big jump up again. It's like there's a little bit of similarities going on here when it comes to average days on market. If that bears out like some of the other numbers, we're just seeing what looks like to be a consistent year for Goodyear. So let's look at absorption rate. Absorption rate, present number is about 4 months. So that's still in that balanced market arena. Hasn't changed tremendously. We saw a little under 3 months in January, a little bit over 4 months come February, back down again, up again, and a little bit more. But we're talking a 3.7 up to 4.12. So we're not really seeing a big jump here. Looking at last year, obviously quite a bit of volatility when it came to the amount of time. But nevertheless, our year so far is looking pretty consistent. So Goodyear's market is, remained active over the last 90 days, with sales increasing significantly while inventory stays relatively steady. But real estate is always local. The right strategy depends on your neighborhood, your price range, and the specific features of your home. A luxury property in Estrella, a retirement home in Pebble Creek, newer home near Loop 303, they can perform very differently. So if you're thinking about making a move, contact me for a personalized neighborhood report or a detailed review of your home's current value. The best decisions are going to start with local and accurate data. So if you need accurate data, if you really want a true breakdown of what you're seeing in your neighborhood, in your part of the city, please reach out to me and let me provide that for you. I'd love to discuss that with you. We can bring up the graph here. We can get a little bit more detailed, but just let me know what you need. I'd be happy to serve you. Again, my name is Tim Downs with the Downs RE Legacy team at West USA Realty, and I'm happy to help you make your next move with confidence. Thank you.